We live in interesting times.
On tonight's headlines.
Ukraine demands the release of its sailors and more sanctions against Moscow after the Russian Navy fired on and seized 3 Ukrainian ships off the coast of Crimea.
A 5.7 magnitude earthquake struck off the western coast of Taiwan Monday, the U.S. Geological Survey said, and was felt hundreds of kilometers away in Hong Kong.
Meanwhile, more than 700 people were injured in a 6.4 magnitude earthquake that shook western Iran.
Malacanang said the government will investigate reports that Chinese Coast Guards barred a Filipino television news crew from conducting interviews in Panatag Scarborough Shoal.
I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
And now to the news. Malacanang said the government will investigate reports that Chinese Coast Guards barred a Filipino television news crew from conducting interviews in Panatag or Scarborough Shoal and urged them to file a formal complaint to allow the Philippine government to take appropriate action. Presidential spokesperson Salvador Panelo made this remark after footage of the incident aired on a show which was recorded on November 8, a few days before the 2-day state visit of Chinese President Xi Jinping to the country.
First, we have to validate. We have to validate what happened there. Are you referring to that incident where the media met? Yes. Because I have seen the video. It was shown to me. First, I said we have to validate whether or not, because according to that Coast Guard, it was prohibited. I said, is it a policy of China to prohibit media men from going there or not? We don't know that yet. So that's why I told them, you have to give us a letter complaint expressing your concern so that we can act appropriately. We will refer your complaint to the DFA, and DFA will write the government of China whether or not there is such a policy. Because I was asking them, why in the first place did you go there? They said, we had to interview the fishermen because the last time we interviewed them, they were saying that their fishes were being confiscated, or half of the caught fish. And I was asking them, were they able to interview them? Yeah, yes. Oh, and what did they say? They said, hindi na sir. Oh, okay pala. Okay na pala ngayon. Kung dati kino-confiscate, ngayon hindi na. So, pabor pala sa atin.
While it is not yet clear whether China committed the violation or not, Panelo said he has already informed Chinese ambassador to the Philippines, Zhao Jinhua, about the incident. In July 2016, The Hague invalidated China's claim over the West Philippine Sea and ruled in favor of the Philippines' rights over the area. However, China refused to recognize it. President Duterte has taken a friendly approach on the issue by engaging China in bilateral talks.
Malacanang on Monday rejected claims made by Communist Party of the Philippines founding chairman Jose Maria Sison that the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding on Cooperation in Oil and Gas Development between the Philippines and China is a clear act of treason. Presidential spokesperson Salvador Panelo pointed out that there was nothing in the deal which can be basis for treason since it's just an agreement to agree.
Maybe he has not read the agreement signed. It's just an agreement to agree on certain things. There is nothing there that will be a basis for any allegation of treason. Even the critics say there's nothing there. First, the agreement is just an agreement to agree. So it's just a framework, as correctly stated by Secretary of Foreign Affairs. It will be the basis of negotiations, talking points, and then after that, there will be an agreement between the two countries. We'll start from the...
Panelo explained that it will start from those assigned to initially make some talks, then it will reach another level until it reaches Locsin. Malacanang provided members of the media with copies of the MOU in both English and Chinese languages. Under the MOU, both Philippines and Chinese governments have decided to negotiate on an accelerated basis arrangements to facilitate oil and gas exploration and exploitation in relevant maritime areas consistent with the applicable rules of international law. It also states that the two governments will endeavor to agree on the cooperation agreements within 12 months of this memorandum of understanding. In a statement on Saturday, Season described the MOU as a clear act of treason, a blatant betrayal of the sovereign rights and national patrimony of the Philippines and the Filipino people. Season urged Filipinos to reject the MOU since it only sets aside the Philippines' victory against China in the arbitral tribunal ruling on the West Philippine Sea.
To other news now, more than 700 people were injured in a 6.4 magnitude earthquake that shook western Iran, according to state television. In an updated toll Monday, the quake struck Kermanshah province late Sunday with an epicenter 17 kilometers southwest of the city of Sarpol-e-Zihab, according to the country's Institute of Geophysics. State television citing the emergency services said that 716 people had been injured, but there were no reports of deaths or major damage. The initial quake, around 7 kilometers deep, was followed by several aftershocks, including one with a magnitude of 5.2. Morteza Salimi, an official with Iran's Red Crescent Society, said most of Sunday's casualties had been injured in a stampede sparked by the first tremors. Iran sits on top of two major tectonic plates and sees frequent seismic activity.
A 5.7 magnitude earthquake struck off the western coast of Taiwan Monday. The U.S. Geological Survey said and was felt hundreds of kilometers away in Hong Kong. The quake hit around 100 kilometers off the island of Penghu in the Taiwan Strait of Monday morning at a depth of 13 kilometers. There were no immediate reports of casualties or damage from the quake, which the USGS had initially reported at 5.6 magnitude. Residents in the city of Magong on Penghu Island ran outside screaming earthquake after the tremor hit Taiwan media reported. Hong Kong residents reported feeling the quake, and some took to social media to discuss the rare event. The Hong Kong Observatory said it had received nearly 1,000 reports of the quake being felt with a duration of a few seconds.
In other news, hundreds of migrants faced off with riot police when they attempted to cross the U.S.-Mexico border, causing the U.S. to close the San Isidro border crossing in Southern California. Briefly, take a look. Now, U.S. officials briefly closed the border crossing in Southern California on Sunday after hundreds of migrants, part of the caravan condemned by President Trump, tried to breach a fence from the Mexican city of Tijuana. The dramatic shutdown took place only 3 days after President Trump threatened to close the whole border with Mexico if it gets to a level where we're going to lose control or people are going to start getting hurt, according to him. At least 500 migrants, including women and children, had been taking part in a peaceful demonstration in Tijuana before dashing toward the border in an attempt to clamber over a first metal barrier there. Now, several hundred made it over the first barrier and were trying to cross a second, topped with spikes, when U.S. border officers began firing tear gas at them, even as U.S. Army helicopters flew low overhead.
Juntamos la bola de todos, empezaron a tirar bombas lacrimógenas y hirieron a un periodista en la cabeza.
Now, Secretary of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen, later issued a statement accusing the migrants of seeking to harm Border Patrol personnel by throwing projectiles at them. The U.S. President has deployed some 9,000 troops along the border in support of Customs and Border Protection agents. Now, to enter the U.S. legally, migrants must formally apply for asylum, but the wait for those requests to be processed can last up to a year.
Russia has confirmed its vessels have fired to stop Ukrainian ships that had entered Russian waters in the Black Sea illegally. 3 Ukrainian sailors were wounded and have been given medical assistance. The Sea of Azov is located in a zone of heightened tensions between Russia and Ukraine. The Ukrainian vessels were sailing between 2 Ukrainian ports from Odessa in the Black Sea to Mariupol in the Azov Sea. The only waterway that connects the two is the Kerch Strait between Crimea and mainland Russia. Kyiv says it has notified Moscow in advance that its Navy ships would be sailing through the area. Moscow denies it had been given the warning. Ukraine says the Russians tried to intercept the ships ramming the tug. Each country blames the other for the incident. Tension between Russia and Ukraine has been building for months off Crimea under a 2003 treaty between the governments in Moscow and Kyiv. The Kerch Strait and the Sea of Azov are shared territorial waters. But recently there, Russia began inspecting all vessels sailing to or from Ukrainian ports. The UN Security Council will hold an emergency meeting as a result.
Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov accused Kiev of dangerous moves in the Kerch Strait after a confrontation between Russian and Ukrainian naval ships. Take a look.
И в том, что такое нарушение произошло, причем произошло достаточно опасными методами. Маневрирование в узком проливе, конечно, это могло создавать и создавало угрозы и риски для нормального движения судов по этой акватории.
Now, Lavrov said Ukraine had violated international norms with dangerous methods that created threats and risks for the normal movement of ships in the area. On Sunday, Russia boarded and seized 3 Ukrainian ships in the Strait of Moscow-annexed Crimea, accusing them of illegally entering Russian waters in the Sea of Azov. Ukraine has demanded the release of its sailors and more sanctions against Moscow. Now, Lavrov called the incident a clear provocation by Kiev and accused the European Union of blind support for Ukraine. The confrontation at sea has raised fears of a wider military escalation, and the UN Security Council was to hold an emergency session later Monday, U.S. time, to consider a response.
The United Arab Emirates on Monday pardoned a British researcher who was sentenced last week to life in prison for spying, an official statement said. Government media official, in response to the letter from the family of Mr. Hedges requesting clemency and in consideration of the historical relationship and close ties between the United Arab Emirates and the United Kingdom. His Highness UAE President Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan has decided to include Mr. Matthew Hedges among the 785 prisoners released. Mr. Hedges will be permitted to leave the UAE once formalities are completed.
In response to a letter from in response to the letter from a family of Mr. Hedges requesting clemency, and in consideration of the historical relationship and close ties between the United Arab Emirates and the United Kingdom, His Highness has decided to include Mr. Matthew Hedges among the 785 prisoners released. Mr. Hedges will be permitted to leave the country once all the formalities are complete.
Matthew Hedges was among more than 700 prisoners pardoned by UAE President Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan on the occasion of National Day. The news comes after Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt had constructive talks with his United Arab Emirates counterpart over the weekend regarding the fate of the academic who was jailed for life last week. But at the same time, the Emirati government released a video which it claims showed Mr. Hedges admitting he was a member of M16 and was looking into what military systems the UAE was buying. Hedges had always said he was innocent and had been researching the country's security strategy as part of his PhD studies at Durham University. Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt tweeted fantastic news about Matthew Hedges. Although we didn't agree with charges, we are grateful to UAE government for resolving issues speedily.
Meanwhile, China said that it has barred 3 reported U.S. citizens, a woman and her 2 grown children, from leaving the country because they are suspected of economic crimes. According to the New York Times, Chinese-born mother Sandra Han and her children, Cynthia and Victor Liu, were prevented from leaving the country after they arrived in June. The children say police are preventing them from returning home to compel their father, a former executive at a Chinese state-owned bank, to return to China to face criminal charges, according to the Times. Now, their mother is allegedly being held in a secret site known as a black jail. The Chinese law does not recognize dual citizenship. While China is known to bar naturalized foreign citizens who are former Chinese nationals from leaving, it's rare that one of those being held was born in the United States. Now, the siblings claim they are innocent and are being used to pressure their father, Liu Changming, a wanted man in China. A former executive of the Bank of Communications, Liu is accused of helping to carry out one of the country's biggest bank frauds, in which $1.4 billion in illegal loans were issued to property developers. He fled China in 2007, and his children say he's estranged from the family, cutting off ties in 2012.
European Union leaders on Sunday approved a historic Brexit deal, handing the baton to British Prime Minister Theresa May, who must now convince her skeptical party and country to support it. European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker said Brexit was a tragedy, but he and other leaders meeting in Brussels warned the withdrawal terms were now set. May faces a major battle to get the agreement through the House of Commons before Brexit Day on March 29, with MPs of all parties, including her own, saying they will oppose it and try to negotiate a better deal.
Balanced agreement with the UK.
The European Council invited the Commission, the European Parliament and the Council to take the necessary steps to ensure that the agreement can enter into force on the 30th of March 2019, so as to provide for an orderly withdrawal.
Those who do think, by rejecting the deal, that they would have a better deal, will be disappointed in the first seconds after the rejection of this deal.
Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel hailed the deal as a piece of diplomatic art, but admitted that it left her with sadness.
Es ist tragisch, dass Großbritannien die EU nach 45 Jahren verlässt. Aber wir haben das Votum der britischen Bevölkerung natürlich zu respektieren. Und vor diesem Hintergrund ist es gut, dass wir eine Einigung auf ein Austrittsabkommen und auf eine politische Erklärung zu den zukünftigen Beziehungen mit Großbritannien haben.
But in London, Eurosceptics and May's Conservative Party and their Northern Irish allies argue the agreement keeps Britain too close to the EU and have vowed to oppose it. Media reports on Sunday suggested some of May's own ministers were secretly working with EU diplomats on a Plan B in case Parliament rejected it.
We're on the verge of making a historic mistake. And I just say this, unless we change course, we are going to stay in the customs union, we're going to stay in the single market, and we're going to be rules taker. And unless we junk this backstop, we are going to find that Brussels has got us exactly where they want us. And so we won't be able to do any trade deals of any significance or any value, because what they've done in Brussels is a very, very clever trick. They've made Northern Ireland their indispensable bargaining chip in the future negotiation.
For us, we cannot wish away the fact that the draft withdrawal agreement contains arrangements that we believe are not in Northern Ireland's long-term economic or strategic interests. Northern Ireland would remain part of the European Union's customs code, and as things stand, we would be sowing the seed of inevitable economic divergence from our largest market.
DUP fears the backstop, which, if used, would keep Northern Ireland more closely aligned with the EU in certain areas, following a 21-month transition period, will effectively create a border between the British province and the UK mainland.
Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Theresa May declared that a Brexit deal struck with the European Union is the only one possible, and urging MPs and the British public to get behind it.
And as has been said, if people think somehow there's another negotiation to be done, that's not the case. This is the deal. It's the result of what has been tough and difficult negotiations over a significant period of time. And as has been said, this is the deal that is on the table. This is the best possible deal. It's the only possible deal.
Anti-government protesters clashed with French police on the Champs-Élysées in Paris on Saturday, leaving the area cloaked in tear gas and smoke from fires on a fresh day of demonstrations against President Emmanuel Macron. Demonstrators wearing the yellow high-visibility vests that symbolize their movement threw projectiles at police, preventing them from moving along the famed shopping avenue, which was decked out in twinkling Christmas lights. 130 people were arrested, 42 of those in Paris, and 19 people were injured, including 4 police officers, the City Police Department, and Interior Minister Christophe Castaner. Elsewhere, protesters took over highway toll booths to let traffic pass for free or held go-slow vehicle processions, underlining one of their core complaints of escalating taxes on car fuel, especially diesel. Many of the often low-income yellow vest protesters are particularly incensed in President Macron's decision to hike anti-pollution taxes on diesel while scrapping a wealth tax on the rich.
To other news now, a needle has been found in a strawberry in New Zealand. The second incident to hit the country 2 months after a contamination crisis erupted in Australia. The needle was found in a punnet sold in the small South Island town of Geraldine over the weekend, according to New Zealand police. The supermarket owner, Gary Sheed, said he had since taken all strawberries off the shelves, but would not comment on whether the punnet was from Australia or New Zealand. This is the second such incident in New Zealand since the scare was sparked in September, when more than 200 reported incidents of needles hidden in strawberries were reported in Australia. Now, some of those cases were found to be hoaxes or false complaints. A 50-year-old woman who worked at one of the strawberry farms where the tampered produce was grown has since been arrested in Queensland and charged with contaminating goods.
North and South Korea marked a new step in their reconciliation efforts Monday as UNESCO accepted a joint bid for Korean wrestling to be recognized as one of the world's most treasured cultural practices. The two Koreas had originally filed separate applications for their traditional form of wrestling to be recognized on the UN agency's Intangible Cultural Heritage list. The announcement is the latest in a string of symbolic gestures between Seoul and its nuclear-armed neighbor in recent months. Last week, the two announced that they had connected a road across their shared border for the first time in 14 years, while earlier this month, the South gifted the North hundreds of tons of tangerines in exchange for mushrooms. Annual joint military exercises between South Korea and its ally, the United States, have been scaled down for spring 2019 to avoid undoing diplomatic advances to bring peace to the Korean peninsula.
And the news continues here on Eagle News International. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. A sandstorm brings strong winds and a towering sand wall of almost 100 meters tall to Xiangyi City of northwest China. Watch. A northwest Chinese city was engulfed by a massive sandstorm that sparked rural fires, forced traffic to slow down, and prompted residents to cover their faces, according to state media. Video from state broadcaster CCTV showed a gray wall of sand hitting Jiangyi City in Gansu province on Sunday, casting a yellow fog across the city. Visibility went below 100 meters in parts of the city, and police were deployed to ensure safety along the expressways. Vehicles were made to slow down, and police in high visibility vests were seen directing traffic. Winds also sparked fires in rural areas when heating kindle was blown onto haystacks. Authorities in the city also put out an advisory warning of dry weather and a risk of fire, telling residents to take precautions. Now, such storms regularly occur in the dry season when winds blow loose dry soil and sand into urban areas from the Gobi Desert, coating cities in a layer of yellow grime.
These before and after images taken between September and November 2018 show the extent of Beijing's air pollution crisis each year. Usually, as winter approaches, the air quality in China reaches hazardous levels. Watch this.
Over to the U.S., a powerful winter storm is blasting the Midwestern part, resulting in snow-packed roads, extensive airline delays, power outages, and property damage. The combination of increasing winds, heavy snow, and poor visibility will create localized blizzard conditions at times, according to AccuWeather senior meteorologist Alice Sosnovsky. Blizzard conditions have been observed across portions of Missouri, Illinois, and Kansas this evening. Dangerous winter weather will continue to batter a portion of portions of Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan through Sunday night U.S. time. Meanwhile, snow continues to pile up in the Chicago area, with accumulation exceeding 10 inches across a swath of north-central Illinois. Strong winds will persist across the area through the night, increasing the threat of widespread power outages, dangerous travel conditions, and lakeshore flooding in Chicagoland. Over 150 flights have been canceled or delayed at O'Hare and Midway airports in Chicago from 8 p.m. to midnight this evening alone.
The deadliest and most destructive fire in California's history was finally brought totally under control by firefighters more than 2 weeks after it erupted, authorities said on Monday. The so-called Camp Fire, which broke out on November 8th, is so far known to have killed 85 people. The Butte County Sheriff's Department said that they had mistakenly added 2 people to an earlier death toll of 87. However, late Sunday, they increased the number of missing people to 296 from 249, still considerably lower than the 474 reported missing on Friday. Only 54 of the fatalities have been identified, according to the local sheriff's office in Butte County, a rural area north of the state capital, Sacramento. A total of 153,336 acres were affected by the fire, with nearly 14,000 homes and hundreds of other structures destroyed. Heavy downfalls that have soaked the fire zone in the past days helped douse the remaining flames, but also made it more difficult for crews searching for bodies. The Camp Fire was the second major blaze to hit California in recent weeks, with the fire in the Malibu area near Los Angeles also killing 3 people.
Up to 145 pilot whales have died in a mass stranding on a remote part of small New Zealand island. The stranding was discovered by a hiker late Saturday on Stewart Island, 30 kilometers off the southern coast of the South Island. Half of the whales were already dead, and due to the condition of the remaining whales and the remote difficult to access location, the decision was made to euthanize the remainder. Whale strandings are relatively common on New Zealand shores, with the Conservation Department responding to an average of 85 incidents a year, mostly of single animals. On Sunday, 10 pygmy killer whales stranded at 90 Mile Beach at the top of the North Island. 2 have since died, and attempts will be made Tuesday to refloat the survivors. A sperm whale which beached on nearby Doubtless Bay died overnight on Saturday, meanwhile, while the body of a dead female pygmy sperm whale was found at Ohiwa on the west coast of the North Island. Exactly why whales and dolphins strand is not fully known, but factors can include sickness, navigational error, geographical features, a rapidly falling tide, being chased by a predator, or extreme weather.
Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned. Today and tomorrow, oil firms implement its 7th price rollback on petroleum products as global crude prices continue to go down. The prices of diesel were reduced by as much as 2 pesos and 20 centavos to 2 pesos and 30 centavos per liter. Excuse me. While that of gasoline were cut by 1 peso and 10 centavos per liter, the price of kerosene, on the other hand, was reduced by a hefty of 2 pesos and 10 centavos a liter. Phoenix Petroleum led the price cuts, adjusting their prices as early as Saturday, followed by Sea Oil, which cut their prices on Sunday, and Jetty Petroleum, which implemented the rollback on Monday. Other big players, Caltex, Pilipinas Shell, and PTT Philippines will implement their price cuts tomorrow, Tuesday, November 27. Because of this, the prices of diesel have been reduced to around 40 pesos per liter, or in some places, particularly in Malolos, Bulacan, to as low as 38 pesos per liter because of the intense competition of gasoline stations in the area. Gasoline, on the other hand, has prices ranging from 45 pesos to around 50 pesos per liter. In some, or if the previous price cuts will be added up, this seventh consecutive rollback on the prices of petroleum products has slashed prices of diesel by a total of 8 pesos and 30 centavos to 8 pesos and 55 centavos per liter, gasoline by 9 pesos and 80 to 10 pesos and 50 per liter, and kerosene by 7.15 per liter. Global oil prices went down on Friday at lows not seen for more than a year. The commodity has plunged by about a third from its 4-year highs touched at the start of October, owing to a range of issues, including a global slowdown, the trade row, rising supplies, softer than expected U.S. sanctions on Iran, a stuttering China, and strong dollar.
In other business news, Finance Secretary Carlos Dominguez III stressed that the country is not falling into a debt trap, even as it takes more loans from foreign governments to fund its massive infrastructure program called Build, Build, Build. In his speech during the consultation event with the private sector and other stakeholders dubbed Sulong Pilipinas, Dominguez said allegations that the current administration is putting the country into deep pit is totally unfounded. He explained that the loans extended by foreign countries, particularly by Japan and China, are soft loans at the lowest possible interest rates and the longest possible term.
Our economy responded well to the infrastructure program, and the tax reform package enables us to finance it. This program also benefited from generous financing support extended by our two closest development partners in the region, Japan and China. Some uninformed critics claim that we are falling into a debt trap by tapping Chinese and Japanese financing for our strategic infrastructure projects. This is totally unfounded. The financing we availed of are soft loans at the lowest possible interest rates and the longest possible term arrangements. If we include project financing coming this year, our estimated project debt to China will only constitute 0.65% of our total debt from the current 0.11%. Our project debt to Japan will increase the current 3.17% to 8.9% of the total debt at the end of this year. By 2022, when most of the financing for the Build, Build, Build program should have been accessed, our project debt to China will constitute around 4.5% of the total debt, while the project debt to Japan will be around twice as large at 9.5% of the total. So there is no danger of us being drowned by Chinese debt. We borrow with great prudence, aware that it is the taxpayer who ultimately pays for the debt. We always keep in mind that the money we borrow comes from the taxes dutifully paid by the people of the countries that have continued to generously support us. Thus, we take care that the funds we borrow are wisely used and produce sufficient economic benefits to make the debt service easier down the road.
Japan and China have committed to fund some of the 75 priority projects of the Duterte administration.
All is set for the inauguration of Panglao International Airport, the country's first eco airport on November 27, the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines announced on Monday. The airport has green and sustainable structures, solar panels, motion sensor lighting, and other features. The new airport will replace the Tagbilaran Airport, which has limited capacity for expansion, Apolonio added, citing the growing volume of tourists in Bohol. The new airport was built on a 22-hectare land and cost 8.9 billion pesos, according to CAAP. The project had a funding support from the Japan International Cooperation Agency, or JICA. President Duterte was invited to grace the airport's inauguration.
Executives of Japanese car firm Mitsubishi Motors decided to sack Carlos Ghosn as chairman as the once revered tycoon faces allegations of financial misconduct that sparked his shock arrest. The move follows Ghosn's sacking as chairman of Nissan as he faces questioning in a Tokyo detention center over claims he underreported his salary to the tune of $44 million over several years. The 64-year-old Brazil-born Frenchman rode to Mitsubishi Motors' rescue in 2016 when the firm was battered by a fuel efficiency cheating scandal, tying it to his Nissan-Renault alliance and turning its fortunes around. Together, the three-way alliance is the world's top-selling car company, with some 10.6 million vehicles rolling off the production line. It employs around 450,000 people worldwide. Greg Kelly, a former Nissan executive arrested along with Mr. Ghosn, was quoted by NHK as defending his boss's compensation, saying it was discussed with other officials and paid out appropriately. Japanese prosecutors claim the two men conspired to understate Ghosn's remuneration by about half the 10 billion yen or $88 million he earned at Nissan over 5 years from 2010. Company money is also alleged to have been used to buy property. He has not been formally charged.
Bon, donc maintenant, aujourd'hui, compte tenu de toutes les enquêtes qui ont été...
General Motors is to announce on Monday the closure of a factory in Canada, putting jobs at risk, or putting almost 3,000 jobs at risk, Canadian News and Media reported. The decision is part of the U.S. automakers' plans for a comprehensive global restructuring, Channel CTV reported Sunday, citing several anonymous sources. Other media, including Radio Canada, CBC, had similar reports. The plant in Oshawa, about 60 kilometers northeast of Toronto, was built in 1953, according to the manufacturer's website. GM has 3 other sites in the province of Ontario. It is unclear whether they will also be affected. Last month, the company announced plans to reduce its North American workforce to save money through voluntary redundancies and did not rule out the possibility of layoffs. The job cuts could affect 50,000 employees across the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. About 18,000 of them, or 36% of the workforce, are eligible for voluntary redundancy.
Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned.
MTRCV ang mag-provide na appropriate ratings sa lahat ng TV shows. Para ugaliin ng pamilya ang responsableng panonood. Teamwork tayo, parents!
Rated G, good for all. Oops, rated PG. Dapat may mga magulang para sagutin ang mga tanong ng kabataan.
Grabe, rated SPG, maselan!
Higpitan ang paggabay.
Pag rated MTRCV, rated responsable.
A spacecraft that cost nearly $1 billion is on course to make a perilous landing Monday on Mars if it can survive a high-speed approach and the scorching heat of entering the red planet's atmosphere, a process NASA has nicknamed 6.5 minutes of terror.
Within about 6.5 minutes, we've gone from 12,300 miles an hour as we enter the atmosphere to just 5 miles an hour as we land safely on the surface of Mars.
What we're going to be looking at is not the area around here. What we're going to be looking at is this, the deep interior of Mars, looking at the deep core of Mars, its mantle, and its thin crust up here that have all the rocks that we actually have access to.
And hopefully, as we go through these 7 minutes of terror, kind of increasing the likelihood of humanity to actually land on Mars with this amazing vehicle that is out there ready to land, that will again transform our knowledge of this amazing planet that's right next to us.
Now, if successful, the entry, descent, and landing of the Mars InSight, designed to be the first mission to listen to the interior of another planet and reveal how rocky planets formed, will add another success to NASA's record when it comes to sending spacecraft to Mars. So far, the United States is the only nation to have made it there, and only NASA's unmanned Curiosity robotic rover is still tooling around on the surface. But if it fails, it certainly won't be the first. Of 43 other international attempts to send orbiters, probes, landers, or rovers to Mars, 25 have not made it. Either they crashed onto the surface, missed their planned orbit, or disappeared after launch.
Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also check out our boards on Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Cepeda. Thanks for joining us.
And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles, and
we're one with 25.